Hello everyone, this is a very quick video where we need to get something on your computer ready for the next lesson. Because in the next lesson, we're going to send a request off to a third party or external service. Our server or backend is going to communicate with the service that can create AI images. And in order for that song and dance between your local dev environment and that third-party service, in order for that to work, you do need to have a certain file in your project. Now, we are using local WP, or this local app for your local dev environment. And normally it's used for WordPress websites, and so it already has the file. But remember, you and I deleted all of our files and started with a completely empty canvas. So right now, let me show you all we need to do. Go ahead and find the folder for your project. So I named mine Our App. Remember, you can always click this Site folder. Okay, and then you dig into App, and then you dig into Public. Okay, so right here where we have our different files like, index, register, login, just go ahead and create a new folder, and it needs to have this exact name. It needs to be named WP-includes. Okay, then go inside of that folder and create a new folder, and this needs to have the exact name of certificates. Okay. Now go inside that certificates folder, and now we just need to place one file in this folder. So leave this directory open, and now the question becomes, what file do we need to place in this folder? Let me show you how you can find the file. In the local WP app, just create a new project, or I should say a new site, over in this left-hand menu. So let's see, there you can see it. It's falling off the edge of my screen recording, but down here in the very far left, bottom left corner, you see the plus sign that says add local site. Just go ahead and do that. Just create a secondary site, a new site. You can complete the next few steps off camera, but just create a new site. The name doesn't matter. You can name it anything, and all of the default options are A-OK. Okay, so I named mine Extra Sample Site. Here it is. I just used all of the default options, and I chose a username and password of admin and admin, but it doesn't matter. Just go ahead and click on Site folder for this new alternate site that you just created. Dig into its app folder, then dig into its public folder. Dig into its WP-includes folder. Dig into its certificates folder. So here it is, certificates. And aha, there's the file we're interested in. So you can either just drag that, copy and paste it, cut and paste it, drag it to your desktop first, then drag it into the other folder. But the goal here is just to get it into that folder that we created in our actual project just a minute ago. So I just moved mine over, I dragged and dropped it, and that's all you need to do. Now, for the remainder of this course, as we're working with external services, they will work flawlessly. And by the way, this has nothing to do with when we're going to push our site live up onto the web onto a real server. This is just an issue for local development, like testing on your private personal computer. Cool, but with this file in this certificates folder, which is nested inside WP includes, which is, just in your main public folder, you are good to go. Let's keep things rolling, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Hello, everyone. In this lesson, we are going to actually start creating the AI-generated images for each one of our critters. Right? So instead of just a plain text sentence, we want to see an actual image depicting this sentence. Now, there are so many different ways you could do that, but the way that I'm going to do it is a service called Replicate. This will be a great example for us to see how to work with an API. In the world of programming and web development, you're going to run into APIs constantly. API stands for Application Programming Interface, and think of it like a programmatic way to interact with a service. In other words, instead of us logging into a website in our browser, what if we could, using code, programmatically tell a third-party or external service what to do with our code? Well, that's exactly what an API lets you do. So, Replicate is perhaps one of the most popular services where you can send them a prompt and they will send you back an image. Only we're not going to do that in our web browser. We're going to have our AI agent write code, PHP code, that sends off a request, and you guessed it, sends off a request using the words that a user chose for a critter. Our PHP will talk to the Replicate servers, and then the Replicate server will send back to our PHP backend an image. Now, in order to make this happen, you will need to sign up for a Replicate account, And you will need to put, I put, personally just $1 into my replicate account. I realize not everyone will be comfortable doing that. That's okay. If you don't want to have the image generation part of your project, you can still follow the rest of the course. We're going to learn how to favorite a critter, archive a critter, filter your critters based on the animal type or the adjective or the verb or location. We're also going to learn how to add a beautiful design to our application. We're going to learn how to push our application live up onto the web. There's still a lot of value for you in this course, even if you don't want to put $1 of credits onto a replicate account. However, Replicate is a very reputable company, and I encourage you to follow along with this tutorial if it sounds like it's something that's fun and meaningful for you to do. And just so you're aware, even just $1 of credits allowed me to create over 300 images using this model. So for $1, I was able to practice, build my application until I was perfectly happy with it, deploy it, and obviously once you deploy it to the public, you'll need to set up some sort of limits or payment system. But we'll cover all of that in this course. For today, though, in this lesson, go ahead and pause the video, and if you want to, if you're comfortable adding $1 of credit to an account, go ahead and sign up for a replicate.com account. When you sign up, it will ask you to probably use your GitHub account to sign up. So just make sure at github.com you're logged into your account, and then it should be relatively easy to sign up for a Replicate account. So I'll assume if you're watching the video from this point forward, you're logged in with your replicate.com account. From your dashboard, you should see a way to manage billing or add credits, and I just added $1. What's nice is that Replicate is not going to automatically bill you again when you run out of credits. You have to sort of preload your account, so I felt very comfortable, and I am very cautious with where I enter my payment information, but I felt comfortable just putting $1 of credit, preloading it into my account. From there, Replicate is an amazing playground, so there are so many different models to choose from. So you can use the top Explore menu to search for image models, and you'll see that there are, as you scroll through here, just so many different ones to choose from. Now, they range in cost. So some of them will cost, 30 cents every time you run it, or 1 cent every time you run it. Personally, I'm using this one, and this is the model I recommend you run, because it costs about 1/3 of a penny each time you run it. In other words, you should be able to run somewhere in the ballpark of like 330 images for just $1. And when you're practicing and learning, I like the sound of that. In other words, this is one of the cheapest models to run that I found on Replicate. And just for educational purposes of, creating critters with adjectives, verbs, and locations, I found this to be good enough. So you'll find a link in the resources for this lesson to this exact model. It's called Black Forest Labs. That's the team behind the model. The model is called Flux Schnell. But from this page, the question becomes, how can we use this inside of our PHP code? And I can let you know that, sure, if you wanted to, you could, in your web browser, play around with this playground area. But in terms of using our PHP code, we are interested in this API area right here. So let's click on that, API. Beautiful. Now, down about here, it's going to ask you, which one of these languages are you using? Are you using Node? Are you using Python? We are not. We are using PHP. So what I recommend is clicking on this option, HTTP. This is a generic, it's going to give you code that is very generic. It's using a curl request, but we can have our agent convert this into PHP code very easily. So after you click on HTTP, not this code, this one line of code, but if you scroll down, you should see this area where it's saying, the code is saying curl, and then it's multiple lines of code. Select all of that, or there's actually an icon in the top right corner here to copy all of that into your clipboard. Okay, then back in VS Code, we can write a prompt. Let's get to work. I would say in createCritter.php, if there are no validation errors when a user submits the form, please send off a request to replicate. I will paste in a bit of curl code, and I want you to convert it into plain PHP. For the prompt, have it be, and then we'll say quotes, and then you'll just use an underscore, a blank, 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 right? That's adjective, noun, verb, location. So 4 blanks, a blank, blank, blank in a high quality 3D animation art style, right? Like a blue cat jumps rope on a mountain. I would say the image should be vibrant and colorful, capturing the essence of the action and setting. Be sure to replace those 4 underscores with the adjective, noun, verb, and location words that the user chose from our database. Let's say plural, databases. And then finally, I'll say, for now, instead of redirecting the user back to the home page, stay on this current page and print the response from replicate onto the page. Here is the curl code I mentioned before. And then just paste in your clipboard that code we got from the replicate website. And then let's go ahead and press enter. Let's see what that gives us. Looks like mine finished. Now right away, before we even bother testing this at all, it's never going to work until we give it something called an API key. In other words, replicate is not going to trust an incoming request unless it knows that it's us, right? The person who just has a replicate account and put preloaded a dollar into their account. So how can it identify us? Well, everyone's code is going to be a bit different. That's the random nature of AI generated code. But if you press Control or Command F and search for the word token, you should find a line of code similar to this, where it's trying to get your replicate API token. Now let's make this clear. You need to be very, very careful with your API tokens. If someone got a hold of your token, they could use all of your credits. So it's a very secret private value. And what we're about to do is an incredibly bad practice, but don't worry, in our very next lesson, I'll show you how to handle your token with care, the way that professionals do. But just to get this rolling, just so you can see the image that it's creating, just for the next few minutes, let's do something dangerous with our API token. Now, you're on your own personal private computer, so you're not in any danger. I'm just saying you wouldn't go live with this code, and you definitely wouldn't push your source code up to GitHub publicly, like in the next 10 minutes. So as long as you don't do anything public with your code before you watch the next lesson, you're not in any danger. But to get your API token, I would just go back into Replicate, and maybe in the top left corner, just click the home page, or better yet, click on your username towards the top left corner, and then click on API tokens. So you can create as many different tokens as you want. You can see I have one called just for course, and while you're hovering over that, just click on this little icon to copy that into your clipboard. Cool, so now that value that's in your clipboard, that proves that you are the user that's logged into Replicate, who has $1 preloaded. So now what I would do is this line, your line will be different, but wherever your PHP code is trying to have your token, in this case, like I would get rid of this function call of get_env parentheses, right? And then wherever it had that code, just replace that with 2 quotes, and then in between the 2 quotes, just paste in your clipboard. Now, this is what I'm talking about. You would never in the real world deploy this code or host your source code publicly on GitHub because you're leaking your API key, right? So don't worry. In our very next lesson, I'll show you how to handle this in a much more secure fashion. But just for right now, this should do the trick. Go ahead and save this file and let's test things out. So back in our app where I'm logged in, let me click Create New Critter, and I'll choose what? A fluffy cat. I'll do builds with blocks, let's say at the North Pole. I'll click Create Critter. Okay, good news and bad news. So the good news is it didn't redirect me to the home page like before. We see your critter has been created, but where it says Replicate Response, there's nothing. I was expecting to see a big blob of code that Replicate was sending back to us. So let's go back into our prompt and say, I just tested submitting the critter form, and where it says replicate response, it is completely blank. Can you double check our code and help me understand why it is failing? Let's see what it gives us. Okay, looks like my agent finished. Now, everyone's is going to be very different. It's so random, so there's not much value in reading through this with you. But my agent said, I see the issue. So let's see if that actually fixed things. So let me go test it again. Right, so I'll go back, click Create Critter, be sure to refresh, and let me just fill that out again. This time I'll say maybe like the crochet chipmunk jumps at the beach. Let's click Create Critter. Awesome, this is perfect. So this may not look too exciting. However, now that it gave us back this big blob of code, we're very close. So now what I would do is just give this big blob of code to the agent and have it look for what we're looking for. I can let you know right away just on this page. If you press Control or Command F, if you're on Mac, Command, if you're on PC, Control F. But if you just search for WebP, that should find the end of the address with your image. So for example, like it ends here on WebP. If you just scroll to the left, it should begin with HTTPS replicate delivery. Copy that URL into your clipboard, and then just in a new tab, paste in that URL and press enter. Right, like visit that URL, and there you have a crochet chipmunk jumping on the beach. So we've done it. So now all we need to do is give this not that URL address, but this entire block of code. Select that entire chunk of code. Make sure you grab all of it and give it to the AI agent. So here's what I would say. I would say, perfect. Now, instead of printing the response from replicate, I want you to show an HTML image element, just IMG image element, and for its source, show the newly created image from replicate. Here is the example, let's say JSON, all uppercase. This stands for JavaScript Object Notation. All that means is it's the format that this big blob of data is in. I'm just trying to give the agent as much context as possible. So I'll say, here is the example JSON response, and you'll be trying to look for the output property value that ends in .webp. So we're sort of helping it parse that big blob of data. Now, before you press enter, I would say below is the example JSON response, and then just paste in your clipboard from the browser. Let's go ahead and press enter and see what that gives us. It looks like mine finished. Let's go test it out. So let me click back, create new critter, refresh to get a clean slate. And let's try another fun one. Let's say glittery koala plays the drums at the pumpkin patch. Let's see what that gives us. Click create critter. Awesome. Now, obviously, the sizing in the UI design is not right, but there we see the actual image on our page. Now, let me zoom out so we can see that just for fun. Now, where do we go from here? Well, we have a lot of details to take care of. So up next, well, first of all, we're going to learn how to take care of our API token in a secure, professional way. But beyond that, I'll let you know that this image is living on Replicate servers, and in the next 5 to 30 minutes or so, Replicate will delete it from their servers. So we're going to need to save this image to our hard drive or a service somewhere where we can hold on to it forever. In addition to that, we need to store a reference to the image somewhere, because currently, if you go back to the home page and refresh, yes, there we see the glittery koala, but we didn't store in our database a reference to any image. So for the next lesson or two, let's do a few things. Let's, number one, get our API token secured in a professional, private way. And then number two, let's improve this user interface where when you create a critter, it does kick you back to the home page. But let's have our home page actually show the image for each critter. And we'll obviously need to store a reference to it in our database. This is really fun because now we are dynamically creating images. We're starting to tie all of the different puzzle pieces together. Let's keep things rolling, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Hello everyone. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to properly protect our API keys, or you could call them API tokens. Remember, in our previous lesson, in createCritter.php, we got this working. The replicate server is successfully generating an image for us because it has our token. It can trust that we are the user that has an account, and we put like $1 into our account. However, and by the way, because I'm showing this on screen, before this course ends, I'm going to have to delete and disable this key. Otherwise, anyone watching this video could use all of my credits. But the point here is that these key values are very sensitive. You don't ever want anyone to see your value here. And so when you're dealing with source code, oftentimes you'll share your source code amongst coworkers, or you might want to share your source code publicly on GitHub, or it might get leaked accidentally somehow. And so it's a very, very, very bad practice to have sensitive values like this in your source code. So instead, the industry standard way of handling this, what the professionals do, is have a separate file that has all of your sensitive values, and then it's up to each developer to somehow secure and put those values in that separate file. And then your source code just references that file. Let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. Let's give the AI agent a prompt. So let's tell it this. Please create a .env file for me that lives one folder up outside of my project folder. That way it is not in the public web root. In the .env file, please include a few example keys and values so I can see how the syntax works. You can use random fake variable names and values. Okay, let's go ahead and press enter and see what that does. Because it's outside of the workspace of this folder, right? It's up one folder from this. It is needing my permission, so I'm going to give it permission and just say allow. Okay, now we cannot see that file in this directory because it doesn't live in this folder. It lives one folder up. However, I don't want you to close VS Code and then reopen a new folder because I don't want you to lose all of your AI agent chat history. So definitely leave this VS Code window open. And instead, what I recommend is just opening up local, and with our app selected, you can use this site folder link. And then you don't need to go into app to open up public. Just right here where you see app, conf, and logs, just open up the entire app folder with VS Code. So like I would open up app in VS Code. So now you can see I have two VS Codes. So this one we're going to use temporarily, and then we can close it. And then this one in the background, this is our, the primary window we've been using with our full AI chat history. But in this one that we just opened, there you'll see a .env file. You can go ahead and click that. And here you can see the syntax. So there's no quotes. It's just all uppercase for a variable name. Like you could say, down here just as an example, you could say like sky color. Then there's no quotes or space. It's just all mushed together equals. And then again, no quotes or anything, or like all uppercase, grass color equals green. So you get the idea. That's how simple the syntax is. So we don't need all of these example ones. We only need one. And what we want to start with is our replicate API token. So I will delete all these other ones. If yours didn't come preloaded with this, due to the random nature of AI, that's okay. But just have all up. It needs to be all uppercase. Replicate, and then here it has underscore API underscore token. The name doesn't matter, it's just so you and I are on the same page though. Equals, and now here's the important part. Get rid of the value that it has, and then after the equal sign, we need to go move our actual API key. Now again, I'm going to have to delete and disable this after the course because I've leaked it in this video recording. But just select, you don't need the quotes, so just select your actual API token, copy that into your clipboard. Back in this file, just right after the equal sign, just paste in your clipboard, save this file, and now you can close, with it saved, you can close this entire VS Code window. Awesome. Now we just need to use that or point towards that env file value in this line of code and create critter, right? We want our source code to not have any sensitive values like this. Now there are literally a million different ways that you could organize this in terms of folders and files and strategies. But here's what I would do. I would write a new prompt and I would say this. Create a new reusable file named, let's call it like env-loader.php, one folder up out of my project folder so that it is not in the web root. In this new file, using plain PHP and no dependencies, have it be able to access values from the .env file, which lives in the same directory as this new file you're creating. Finally, in our project's create critter.php file, around line number, and now you would need to find your line number, but in create critter, wherever, I'm just trying to give the agent as much context as possible. I can see that where it's currently hard coded, my private token is line 142. You might not need to be this specific, but I think as much information as you can give the agent, the better. So in our project's create critter, around line 142, use the new envloader.php to access the replicate API token value. Let's go ahead and press enter and see what that gives us. It's asking for permission because it's going to create envloader not in this directory but up one folder, so it needs permission because it's not like the workspace folder. So just click allow. Okay, it looks like my agent finished. Now, I don't know if it's just me, but it's really hard for me to get a sense of what the file actually looks like before I keep the changes because, there's some areas duplicated in red and green. So I'm just going to click keep. Okay, and then back in create critter, let's take a look. Perfect. So now it doesn't have the actual sensitive token value. Instead, it's going to use that env loader. It's responsible for accessing the .env file. We would never keep those files, envloader and .env, in our version control system. So now even if our source code ever got leaked, we're okay. None of our sensitive values got leaked. But now, the moment of truth, let's see if this actually works. Let's see if the code that the agent wrote is actually working. So to test that, you would just go try to create a new critter. So you have to be logged in, create new critter. Let me see. I'll say a fluffy moose naps in a hammock at the top of a mountain. Let's click create critter. If we see an image, that means yes. That means our new env variable, or our new way of handling tokens, is working. Perfect. Throughout the course, we can now use that file, that env file, for any other sensitive values. For example, when we start taking payments so that users can buy credits, so on and so forth. Let's keep things rolling, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Hello, everyone. In this lesson, let's pick up right where we left off. So yes, we can create a new critter. I'll say the crochet turtle rides their scooter in a big grassy field. So yes, that image creation works. There we see it. However, the user has no way of getting back to this page once they leave it to ever see the image again. And also, I can just let you know that Replicate is going to delete this image from their server in the next 5 to 30 minutes. So you and I need to do a few things in this lesson. Number one, we need to save this image to our server's hard drive so that we can have it permanently. And then number two, we need to save some sort of reference to that image in our critters database table. So that way, when the user goes back to the home page, right, and we show them a list of all their critters, we have a permanent way of displaying, pointing to or referencing the image. Let's actually start with the database aspect. So in our database, in a future lesson, I'll show you how to add additional columns without deleting the table, but in this case, we don't need to keep any of these existing rows because we don't have an image value for any of them, so they're essentially useless to us anyways. So I would just delete the critters table. So database structure, right-click on critters and click delete table. Click yes, but you're not done. You do need to manually click write changes. Cool. Now here's what I would do. I'd write a new prompt and say in create critter.php, modify the code that creates the critters table if it doesn't exist so that it includes a column named, we'll just call it image, which will contain a string of text. Let's go ahead and press enter and see what that gives us. Now it's not going to automatically line anything up and actually save anything into a row, but just to make sure that that code executes and modifies our table or creates our table, let me create a critter real quick. The blue sheep plays guitar at the mall. Okay, so there we have it. Now, let's go look at our database. It didn't actually save anything into that column, but hopefully there's now an empty column at least. Let's just make sure. Go to Browse Data. Let's see. Oh, got to manually click the refresh icon. Click on Critters. Cool. So it's null or empty, but we have an image column. So now we're just a prompt or two away from having this completely work. Here's what I would do. Write out this prompt with me. Let's say in create critter.php, once we get the response back from replicate successfully, save the image to our hard drive, comma, in the root of our project folder, create a new folder called critter images and save the image in there. Give each file a guaranteed to be unique file name that is 32 characters long and then ends in .webp. Let's say finally, when creating the new critter row in the critters table, be sure to include this new unique file name as the value in the image column. Okay, let's go ahead and press enter and see what that gets us. Looks like mine is finished. Let me go back and test this out. So I'll say the purple turtle plays the piano inside a snow globe. Click create critter. Now, first of all, I don't think the AI could read our mind and take it one step forward, but if I open that image in a new tab, I would expect that to still live on replicate servers. Yes, perfect, because we didn't tell it to perform that step yet. However, let's go look at our database. So let me refresh the critters table. Aha, I like the look of this. So for that new row, look at the image column. It has a 32 character guaranteed to be unique file name, and then it ends in .webp. Now for the moment of truth, let's go look at our hard drive. So I'll click on site folder for this app. Let's go into app. Aha. So your AI agent may have put critter images inside of public. I actually wanted it to live inside the public folder. I want these to be publicly available. Let me explain my thought process. So if you were dealing with some sort of image that was actually super private and you wanted to make 100% sure that no one other than the logged in user who created it could ever see it, you would indeed want to keep it up outside of the public web root like this. And then you could use PHP to fetch the image, look at the incoming session and cookie. And that's great if you're dealing with really sensitive data. However, it's bad from a performance and caching perspective. So in this case, these images, it's okay if, first of all, it's going to be very difficult for someone to guess the 32 character file name. But even if worst case scenario, another user saw a different user's critter image, it's not the end of the world. So I actually want this to live inside the public folder. So let me just delete critter images. Let me go back into my database and just delete that row really quick. I'll actually delete both of these rows because neither one of them have a correct value. So I'll delete records. Be sure to click write changes up here. And let me write a little prompt to correct that. I would say perfect. However, don't store the critter images folder one folder up from the public web root. I indeed want it in the public web root. So just in the root of my project. Okay, let's go ahead and press enter and see if that fixes it. Again, you might not have needed to perform that step if your AI agent already had the critter images folder, just in the root of your project right here. Okay, let me test that out really quick. So if I just create another critter, the wooden teddy bear flies a kite on top of a cloud. Looking good, but the moment of truth, yes, perfect. Now we have a new folder named critter images, and there is the image. Right, I can double click it, perfect. So now we don't want to, like if you right click on this and click open in new tab, we don't want to point towards the replicate image. We want to display our image on our hard drive. Now this is really easy. Here, let's take it one prompt at a time. Let's say, perfect. In create critter.php, after a critter is successfully created, don't stay on the current page. Instead, redirect them to the home page, and then parentheses, you could say like quotes, just /, right? Just the base domain, the base URL of your domain. Redirect them to the home page. And then let's say this: on the home page, or index.php, in the list that shows all of the current users' critters, show an image for each critter, and you can find the source for their image in the image column in the critter row. When building the image path, don't forget the images live in the critter images folder. Okay, let's press enter and see how that works out. Looks like mine finished. Let me give this a try. So if I go to the home page, let me click create new critter. I'm not liking the look of this. I would have assumed there to be an image right there, but let me click create new critter and create a new one. The fuzzy monkey builds with blocks in the backyard. Interesting. So it created the row in the database. If I look in my critter images folder, there is the image. So let's just give the AI a new prompt and say, no images are displaying on the home page, even though I know for a fact the user I'm logged in as has 2 images and both have valid values in their database columns. Please double check the code in index.php responsible for displaying the images for a critter. See what that gives us. Due to the random nature of AI, you might not have even had that issue, but it looks like my agent is saying that they just weren't selecting that column value in the database query. So let's go try it, or just actually refresh the home page. Perfect. I think now this is really starting to come together. So now you can create a critter, it kicks you back to the home page, and you'll immediately see your new critter image. You can right click on it and click open a new tab. It is saved forever, permanently on our backend's hard drive. We've saved it into the database. This is really starting to feel like a living, breathing application. At this point, we still have a lot of features to add, right? We want to be able to favorite, archive, filter our critters. We also want to add in the ability of like having credits, like users can buy 50 credits for $5 or something along those lines. But before we get to any of those extra features, I think we should start to worry a little bit about the design, the user experience, the user interface. So let's talk about that in our next lesson. Let's keep things rolling, and I'll see you then. Hello everyone. I wouldn't even call this video a lesson. This is just a really quick note to talk about storing large amounts of files or data. So in our previous lesson, we saved the AI-generated image onto our local hard drive. Now, towards the very end of this course, when you push your website live up onto the web, onto a web host, that means we're just going to store our critter images on the host's local hard drive. Really quick, I just want to spend about a minute or two to explain to you that if your web app is not going to take off and get tons of users and tons of traffic, that approach is perfectly fine. I would say even if you're getting a medium amount of traffic and users, that is completely fine. However, if your application truly gets popular or truly goes viral or gets a substantial amount of users, you're absolutely not going to be able to use just simple hard drive storage like that. And I'm just letting you know that the industry standard for when you're going to have huge amounts of file storage needs is to use AWS, which stands for Amazon Web Services. They have lots of different storage products, but perhaps one of the most famous or familiar is S3. For small amounts of data, your bill each month would be under $1. Even for large amounts of data, like 100 gigabytes, you'd probably still be under $5 a month. Don't quote me on that. You can ask ChatGPT for like a rough estimate. But my point is that it's super affordable even for large or huge amounts of storage. And if you're building an application that is truly used by, like thousands or millions of users, this is how you handle it. However, the reason I'm making this video is implementing something like this is a lot more complex than it might sound. Now, it's not rocket science, but the point is that I don't want you to get distracted with details like this while building Critter Loop. I'm not trying to insult our application, but the odds of you actually getting thousands or millions of people to use your application are very low. And so just in terms of educational value, I'd rather you just move forward building the application knowing that it's probably not going to get a million users right away. And just know that if and when you ever develop something, maybe if you get hired as a developer or you actually have an idea that takes off, just know that you've got it covered. If that time actually arises, you can research and ask AI to help you implement AWS storage. The point here is that this is how you can have infinite, truly infinite amounts of storage. It comes at a little bit of a cost, but it's very cost efficient. For our application and generating little 60 kilobyte critter images, we don't need to worry about this right now at all. Let's keep our momentum rolling, and I'll see you in the next lesson.